Hi guys, so following the false alert in Hawaii, we now have a false alert that was issued in Japan. I'm starting to get a little bit concerned about all these false alerts that they're putting out, and I don't think they are necessarily just false alerts. I think they're signals, as in things are about to kind of start. So Japan's national broadcaster has sent a text alert reporting that North Korea launched a ballistic missile at the country and then corrected itself. NHK News initially sent out a tweet warning of a missile launch and warned people to evacuate and take shelter. It translated to ballistic missile threat inbound to Japan. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. But minutes later, it deleted the tweet and tweeted patterns of North Korean missile launch isn't erroneous. The nightmarish warning was received by people with national broadcaster NHK's app on their phones. An apology was issued on the NHK's website and later shared on its social media platforms. It read around 6:55 p.m. earlier. We reported on the NHK's news site and NHK's news disaster prevention application pattern of North Korean missile launch, but this was incorrectly issued. J alert has not appeared. I must sincerely apologize. Now that, as it says here, is just a few days after the false alert led a million people in Hawaii to believe they were within minutes of being obliterated by a nuclear missile. I think all of this is to garner support for a preemptive strike on North Korea. It appears that way because these things don't just happen, you know. Radar, I mean, there's a history of false alerts, but those false alerts have never been so big that they've translated to the public at the time of the event. We usually find out like months or years later that, something potentially could have happened, but it was averted. But these messages are reaching the public, telling them that missiles are on the way, putting fear in them, and then saying, oh, sorry, it was a mistake. It seems as if they're really trying to ramp up the support for a preemptive strike on North Korea because people are fearing for their lives. And to have a second alert come out in just a matter of days that was also a mistake just says to me that things are taking quick steps towards what looks like could be the start of World War III. And that just brings me on to the next report where two US nuclear-ready bombers arrive in Guam as Trump amasses fleet near North Korean border. Now, we know that they already sent 3 B-2 stealth bombers over to Guam. Now, they've sent the B-52H Stratofortress strategic bomber, and that landed at Anderson Air Force Base on the island this morning after flying across the Pacific from the US. The advanced aircraft joined a fleet of B-1B and B-2A bombers already deployed to the military outpost territory around 3,430 kilometers from North Korea. Last week, the US Air Force sent 3 nuclear-capable B-2 stealth bombers and 200 air personnel to Guam ahead of crunch talks between North Korea and South Korea. The addition of the 644-mile-per-hour B-52Hs, whose array of weapons include gravity bombers and precision-guided missiles, marks the first time since August 2016 that all 3 types of US bombers have gathered at the same base. Despite the rare assembly of warplanes, the Pentagon said the B-52Hs were sent as part of a bomber assurance and deterrence mission in the Pacific, but the deployment sends a provocative message to North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un at a sensitive time in the crisis engulfing the Tinderbox region. And that's the image of the B-52Hs. And in addition to that, we have, more deployment. I was just reading the document, so the US is beefing up its presence around the Korean Peninsula ahead of next month's Winter Olympics by deploying stealth bombers, at least 1 extra aircraft carrier, and new amphibious assault ship to the region, coming after Washington agreed to postpone massive annual military maneuvers with South Korea until after the Games. North Korea said the US is trying to put a chill on its renewed talks with Seoul. Such moves are an unpardonable military provocation, chilling the atmosphere for improved inter-Korean relations, the North's ruling party said in a commentary published over the weekend. Representatives of both Koreas held a second round of talks Monday near the demilitarized zone to try to pave the way for a North Korean delegation to join the Pyeongchang Games. The US has officially welcomed the talks, and moves represent routine training and scheduled upgrades, they say. According to US military officials, tensions remain high and the military deployments are significant. So I just want to get into it now. Last week, the Pacific Air Forces announced 3 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers with approximately 200 personnel, as we've mentioned already. They're in Guam. But the Guam deployment hits an especially sore nerve and plays on a key vulnerability for Pyongyang, which is probably the message Washington had in mind as it seeks to make sure nothing happens during the Olympics, and also let Pyongyang know its decision to postpone the exercise is not a sign of weakness. They had B-1B bombers flying over there last year, and now they've got the B-2, which is more threatening. It's more advanced, and unlike the B-1B, it can carry nuclear weapons. It's also the only known aircraft that can drop the Air Force's biggest bomb, the 14,000 kilogram, about 30,000 pound FGBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, the MOP, as it's abbreviated to, capable of penetrating deep into the ground to destroy reinforced tunnels and bunkers, was explicitly designed with North Korea in mind. The B-2 deployment came just days after the USS Carl Vinson, which I've talked about as well, and that departed for the Western Pacific in what the Navy called a regularly scheduled deployment. South Korean media reports say the carrier and its strike group will reach waters near the Korean Peninsula ahead of the start of the Games on February the 9th. The USS Ronald Reagan aircraft, whose home port is just south of Tokyo, is also in the region, and North Korea has accused the US of planning to send another carrier, the USS John Stennis, from Bremerton, Washington. The Marines announced on Sunday the arrival in southern Japan of the USS Wasp, an upgraded amphibious assault ship that can carry troops and launch the Corps' new F-35B stealth fighters. It can carry 30-plus aircraft, including the F-35s, which are designed for vertical takeoffs. I'm just going to stop there because I think it's basically covered pretty much all the deployments that have happened so far. You've got F-35s over there. You've got the the B-2 stealth bombers. You've got the B-1Bs. You've got the USS Ronald Reagan, the USS Carl Vinson, what was the other one? The USS Wasp. Potentially another one which North Korea is saying they're going to send over there. Which I can't find the name of it, but it's in the report there. So basically, USS Stennis, John Stennis, that's the one. So that's like 4 aircraft carriers, multiple stealth bombers and different types of aircraft, hundreds and thousands of personnel. I mean, it doesn't seem like this is just deterrence. This seems like a deployment, and a deployment for war, which appears to be stepping up each level. And then you've got fake alerts coming out from, Hawaii and Japan. 2 potential places for a strike from North Korea. And then you've got the underlying current of the bloody nose, and North Korea continuing to tunnel out its missiles, and Russia moving troops to the border, and China moving troops to the border, and the UK recalling all its ships to homeland, apart from 2, which one of them at least is going to be heading over to the Korean Peninsula as well. Then today you've got the meeting in Vancouver with 18 nations. Well, I'm going to get to that anyway, but there's just so much going on. There's so much going on, and it's not routine. This is not routine. Though they keep saying it's routine deployments and stuff like that, it's part of a scheduled programming. This is not routine. This is extremely out of the ordinary, and they're trying to placate the public at the same time as trying to instill fear in the public. US military chiefs are gearing up for a potential showdown with Kim Jong-un's vast army just days after deploying nuclear-capable stealth bombers to nearby Guam. Pentagon top brass quietly ordered nearly 1,000 American troops or soldiers to practice land invasion drills this week in preparation for an emergency deployment. The precaution comes a month after 48 heavily armed Apache gunships stood guard as Chinook helicopters practiced moving troops and equipment under heavy artillery fire at North Carolina's massive Fort Bragg. And 2 days later, 119 soldiers parachuted out of a specially equipped C-17 military cargo planes to simulate a foreign invasion. Last week, satellite images showed increased tunneling at a secretive North Korean nuclear site, indicating that the crackpot Kim could be preparing another nuke test. The pictures show that the tunnel excavation at the Pyongyari facility's west portal has been, quote, stepped up. The underground base, which is carved into a mountain in the northeast of the Hermit Kingdom, has been the site of North Korea's last 5 nuclear tests. The pictures came after the US Army's Chief of Staff, General Mark A. Milley, told US troops to go back to basics in the event of a land war. He said, "Do not wait on orders," and printed new regulations and new manuals. Put simply, I want you to get ready for what might come, and do not do any tasks that do not directly contribute to increasing combat readiness in your unit. This is what one of the airstrike carrier groups looks like. So you've got F-18 Super Hornets, you've got the B-52 Stratofortress, you've got Arleigh-class guided missile destroyers, the Nimitz-class supercarrier, Aegis-guided missile cruisers, nuclear-powered attack submarines, and this is all part of one strike group. Then you've got the other strike groups like the USS Ronald Reagan and the USS Carl Vinson and the USS John Stenner, making a total of 4 strike groups, which consist of an array of ships and aircraft. If you still think nothing's going on, I'm afraid you're just still sleeping. So the B-2 deployment comes after Pentagon dispatched a supercarrier from which Osama bin Laden's bullet-ridden body was dumped to practice clobbering nuke-mad Kim, and that's the Nimitz-class USS Carl Vinson, and it's sailing towards the Korean Peninsula, as I've reported a few times now, accompanied by an array of guided missile destroyers, warships, warplanes, and submarines. So, what is this all about at the end of the day? If it's not the potential for carrying out the bloody no strike, I don't know why you'd have 4 aircraft carriers over there with multiple arrays of ships and aircraft and thousands of troops being deployed, practicing just the kind of strike that I'm talking about, or that we're all talking about. This ties into the fact that the meeting that they're having today in Vancouver with 18 other nations, being hosted by Canada and the United States, excludes China and Russia, 2 key allies, 2 countries that border North Korea and who have kind of been placed on North Korea's side of things. So basically you've got like a meeting of the allied forces today in Vancouver talking about North Korea. They claim that they're going to be talking about the sanctions and how they can further impose or further enhance those sanctions. And one of the things that they're planning to do is to intercept ships trying to defy sanctions, as well as disrupting funding and disrupting resources. Basically, a naval blockade. And we've reported before that North Korea have already said that a naval blockade would be an act of war, and they potentially wouldn't stand for it. And who knows what they'd do in that case? Maybe another provocation, maybe something real, or maybe nothing at all. We just have no idea, but the potential scenarios are what I'm laying out here. And from gathering all the reports together and putting them into a video, you can literally see a military deployment. The military officials themselves aren't telling us that they're doing drills and stuff like that. They've claimed that they've put a freeze on the military drills between South Korea and the US until after the Olympics. But at the same time, all these deployments have happened, and there's military drills still going on with Japan, at least. So, you know, while they're talking of peace and safety, sudden destruction might come. Which brings me to Russia. Russia has played this game quite well. They've been involved, but not necessarily as involved as China, South Korea, Japan, the US. They've kind of sat off on the side saying, You know, we'll help you, we'll help you. But at the same time, Russia possesses an underwater nuclear drone capable of carrying a 100 megaton nuclear warhead. The weapon, referred to in the document as an AUV or autonomous underwater vehicle, is featured in a chart that lays out Russia's multiple nuclear delivery vehicles. In addition to modernizing legacy Soviet nuclear systems, Russia is developing and deploying new nuclear warheads and launchers. These efforts include multiple upgrades for every leg of the Russian nuclear triad of strategic bombers, sea-based missiles, and land-based missiles. Russia is also developing at least 2 new intercontinental range systems, a hypersonic glide vehicle, and a new intercontinental nuclear-armed undersea autonomous torpedo. I'm just going to stop there because basically that just pretty much told you everything that you need to know. Nuclear submarine drone capable of carrying 100 megaton warhead. And some of the submarines themselves can carry up to 6 of these drones. As outlined by Valerie Insinia of Defense News, the Russian undersea drone, officially known as Ocean Multipurpose System Status 6 and nicknamed Canyon by the Pentagon, was reportedly tested in November 2016. Status 6 has a range of 6,200 miles, a top speed in excess of 56 knots, and can descend to depths of 3,280 feet below sea level. And they don't have to worry about resupplying like staff or military personnel because it's a drone and it can be guided by satellite. So that means it could potentially stay in the water forever, for as long as its fuel goes, and as long as it's a nuclear submarine, that is many, many years. The reason I want to point this out is because of the nickname Canyon. And obviously one of the theories surrounding the tsunami is a nuclear detonation in an undersea canyon, particularly the Babylon Canyon, which is located just off the coast of New York. As you can see, the canyon is pretty much a fissure that moves in towards New York. Now, hypothetical scenario, this nuclear drone either fires a nuclear torpedo into that canyon or goes into the canyon itself and self-destructs. Any nuclear explosion is going to be about this size. So looking at it from this vantage point, it looks relatively small. But obviously, underwater, that would cause the surface of the water, well, I don't know how many gallons and cubits of water, but a lot. It would cause the surface to rise up in a bubble shape, the same size as the actual nuclear radius itself, the detonation radius itself. When that rises up, it will then collapse back in on itself. And when it collapses out, or collapses inwards, it will generate a wave radiating outwards in a circle. And that obviously includes New York. So down here, in like the South Carolinas, you'll get the effect of the wave coming towards and then wrapping around the land base come down here. I don't know how far that will travel. And remember, this is a hypothetical situation, so I'm not saying that it is going to happen, but it's a potential scenario that I'd like to cover. So just outside of New York, the Babylon Canyon, if it was detonated in there, not only would it cause a bubble to rise up to the surface and then collapse on itself, generating a tsunami wave that would radiate outwards in a circle, but if it's inside the canyon there, obviously the earth is going to split, and let's see if I can get rid of it, and the crack itself would extend maybe up to New York, maybe even into New York. And that could be why we see the apple splitting in the iPad Goat video. It could also be why we see the lightning bolt on the Economist magazine, suggesting split Earth. I mean, even the Illuminati card game has an image of the Earth split. And if that is due to the fact that some form of nuclear device has been placed in this canyon and detonated, or a nuclear drone has gone into the canyon and self-destructed, that would suggest some earthquake, some ruptures in the earth, and definitely the generation of a tsunami. So that ties into the great shakeout that you guys, or that we had last year, preparing for a massive earthquake. Obviously, they've done it for a number of years now, but, you know, they don't just start these kind of things on the year that it's going to happen. You know, they have to put it in place so it looks normal and that we become accustomed to it, so we don't question it as suspicious. If, for example, they did their first great shakeout drill this year and a massive earthquake happened this year, then a lot more people will be questioning as to whether they had foreknowledge of the situation or whether they even caused the situation. And that ties into the very bad day blackout drill that was done last year as well. And that was called communications in interoperability, testing the communications in the event of an EMP or blackout or failure of the national electric grid. That's pretty much my video. Just wanted to point out how many things are happening at the moment. So much deployment, so much movement, fake missile alert threats from Hawaii and Japan, nuclear drones, potential to self-destruct. And just on that theory, if it did self-destruct, there would be no evidence of the submarine. Therefore, it would be much harder to say, for example, that Russia did it. It would more likely be North Korea did it or Iran did it, because they're the two countries that are prominent on the world stage at the moment for a potential war kicking off. And that kind of just makes me think about the sign going across in the boy's eyes. Uranium, maybe after the tsunami, uranium is detected, and that's when it goes into stock markets crash. Well, stock markets would crash around that time anyway, but then it goes into war coverage. And I don't know, most likely it's blamed on North Korea because that's where they've got most of their military positioned, ready to strike. And then after that comes the North Korean Chinese response, and things just escalate from there. So, guys, I know it's not, you know, it's never really good news, so it's not exactly the best thing to be reporting on, but I don't want people out there to be unaware of what's going on. So this is what we do. So you guys, you have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and God bless.